for joining us today. So today, the projects that we have assembled all have one commonality, which is everybody has made some significant progress in terms of actually creating a certain product. So everyone here has gone through a certain journey. The overall theme that we want to focus on is on your journey in terms of how you built this project. But before we start, for the benefit of those who have not seen your presentation or for those who are going later, can we have a very quick introduction about who you are and your project?
Hi, I'm Daniele Sileri. I'm CEO, co-founder of Blockchain Studios, and we are venture production studios. Our first project is a gaming platform and a game called Crypto Cards, and we're based in Hong Kong.
Hi, Peter Tsankov, co-founder of Chain Security. We're a blockchain security startup. We build a core infrastructure that will secure the blockchain in the future.
Hi, I'm Boyd Cohen, CEO, co-founder of IOMob. We are building a decentralized mobility aggregation platform. You'll hear more about it in a few minutes. We're based in Barcelona and npower right here in Singapore.
I'm Ruben, the COO of Zcoin. We are primarily about financial privacy on the blockchain and about democratized mining and proof of work. And yeah, we've been around since September 2016.
I'm James, I'm from PundiX. We're a manufacturer of various blockchain-based technology solutions, most important of which is the point of sales device. We have the XPOS. We're founded in Indonesia, but we just moved our corporate headquarters to Singapore this month.
Great, so we have a diverse panel here from different industries, from protocol to DApps to even like a smart contract auditing and gaming as well. Now I want to start from the very beginning, from your very origin of your personal story, from when you first hear about blockchain or Bitcoin, and how do you start to get excited or start to get into the industry? Anyone can start.
I will be happy to share the story. So I come from a security background, and I actually started with the DAO hack because then just so many news articles appeared about the importance of this security issue, and yeah, it was very natural for me to say, wow, there's big opportunity to really solve this problem. And we incorporated a team of researchers, built the first product, still without any intention to create any company. We released the first product, the security code scanner, online, and then there was just a huge demand, getting emails from all over the place. Like, can you look at this? Was 2017, so you can imagine, remember how it was back then. And then it became obvious, yes, there's a huge demand from industry to jump and to solve this. So,
I see, from great demand.
I've been in smart cities for 12 years. I've been a researcher and entrepreneur. And in 2016, I started writing my third book, which was called Post-Capitalist Entrepreneurship. And it was my own personal reflections about the evolution of our economy and what's flawed with our economy and how capitalism has gone a bit wrong and it's not inclusive anymore. We have a lot of inequality. But instead of sort of tracking the problems with the economy, I was really excited because my background's in entrepreneurship and I have a PhD in entrepreneurship. So I'm more interested in how entrepreneurs are trying to solve these problems in new ways. And the book was about exploring how new technologies, digital technologies primarily, are enabling new ways of collaboration where startups actually take a different approach to how they create and share and monetize value across ecosystems. And I was researching blockchain as an enabler of some of these new forms of economy. And met with David Lee early on, met with Jamie Burke early on from Outlier Ventures, and actually Jamie Burke, who's a founder of Outlier Ventures out of London, said, Boyd, I want to recruit you to incubate a startup, so I want you to be CEO. At the time I was Dean of Research at a business school in Barcelona, and I was kind of taking a break from entrepreneurship. I don't know how many of you have been an entrepreneur in your life, but it's pretty intense. You don't see very much and you're on planes a lot, and I was kind of enjoying the down life of being a full-time professor, but blockchain sucked me in, and here I am.
Well, I kind of started in 2012, 2013. I'm actually a lawyer by training, but practiced for about 10 years. But even in 2007, I'm from Malaysia. The government started censoring my internet, and I started a VPN service. And it was around then people were telling me, "You're all about privacy. Why don't you accept Bitcoin?" Which was then seen as a private way of payments. And now we know better. And I think I was probably the first merchant in Malaysia to accept Bitcoin. And then after that, I just delved into the space, got involved with Dash, Monero, and now Zcoin. So have been around in the privacy space for a very long time, yeah.
So Pundi X story is a little bit different, I think, as opposed to us finding blockchain. Perhaps blockchain found us. We're more interested in cashless payments and the growth of cashless payments, particularly in Asia. And so our founders came from China, from backgrounds in business in China, and in banking in Indonesia. And we targeted Indonesia for our launch of a cashless QR code-based payment app there because, as many of you might know, up to 50% of the population in Indonesia is unbanked. And of those, about another half don't actually have bank cards. So we thought this is a market that's ripe for a kind of disruption. And so we launched Pundi Pundi, which is the name of the QR code payment app that we had running there from about 2015. And in about 2016, we started turning our attention towards blockchain because it's obviously quite a natural fit for running transactions and processing transactions. And we were surprised by the growth of interest in cryptocurrency in that time, but that pushed us down towards the road of running a crypto-enabled point-of-sale device.
I personally discovered Bitcoin back in 2012 from one of my geek friends when I was doing my PhD at Imperial. And I thought it was like cool magic internet money, so I kept following it, through the boom and bust. And then Ethereum came under 15. I discovered Ethereum, so I started investing in it. Then we started doing some mining, and then how it works. You go down in the rabbit hole more and more. So we discovered about NFTs at DevCon conference last year, and I thought, wow, this is cool technology. I mean, this can be applied lots of stuff as well. DRM or fractional ownership, like many use cases. Then CryptoKitties happened. I said, wow, there is some potential here. So, we started looking at it like closer and closer. And we decided that gaming could be a big thing on blockchain.
Right, so it seems that for you, it's more of that looking at CryptoKitties and finding out subsequently more about the technology, and finding out about CryptoKitties was the trigger for you to start getting into the industry. Yes,
so we realized at that point that that technology that I already thought could have lots of use cases, which I still think there are lots of use cases like digital right management, fractional ownership of, real estate, concert tickets. That's plenty of use cases for NFTs. But I believe gaming is the low-hanging fruit, is what can be used before than any other ones. Yeah.
We'd like to hear from some of the others on the specific triggers, right? Because I think many of us sitting here as well, typically, you learn about the technology, you might be really excited, you might start investing in yourself. But what was that moment or trigger that made you realize that, hey, actually, I want to build something. I want to create something in this industry for myself, right? Maybe it was a person, maybe it was an event, maybe it was finding a co-founder or a certain epiphany. What was it that made you take the plunge?
For me, really, it was there was an obvious problem, and I'm coming from research, so we always look for open problems. So we always work. When we see a problem, you jump on it. You put the top people to work on it and solve it. So, yeah, for me, it was really the news articles about lots of people losing huge amounts of money, and yeah.
Right. So there wasn't a particular moment. It was you were already working on a similar topic, and then you saw the demand, and you subsequently just started building.
Yeah, exactly. So you just saw. First initially, I didn't know. I knew about Bitcoin and the cryptocurrencies way before. I didn't know about smart contracts, so I was actually wondering what the hell is a smart contract. So started reading around it, and then I said, oh, these are actually programs, and they manage cryptocurrencies. Wow. What can go wrong there? So, yeah, that's how it started.
I actually started when I was a VPN provider. And we're doing nothing wrong. We're just like encrypting traffic. And I had my credit cards, payment processes continuously being shut down for no apparent reason, because we're just seen as a high-risk industry. And after that, I was like, wow, I'm really sick of this crap. And, PayPal's charging like 3% and just eating into our profits, especially with like low. Our ticket sizes are typically like $10, and you take out like, minimum fee of like $2 or 50 cents, and then another 3.4%. And I actually got really involved in Dash because, well, it was then called Darkcoin, and it was all about privacy, ASIC resistance, which were topics that were close to heart, especially being in that industry. And after that, they kind of like veered off course, became more about masternodes, and became more about PayPal, the next PayPal, or the payments type of system. And that's when I came across Zcoin, and they were just starting out. They were just 2 people, and I saw that they had really interesting technology, but no one actually bothered to explain it to the people. And I just offered my help just for like peanuts to be their community manager, and somehow just evolve into the role of like basically taking over all their operations. And there's a long story there.
Drag down a rabbit hole.
So I sort of started my start in a way with the talks with Jamie Burke and David Lee and others in my research. But I think, as somebody, and I think there's a few of us around here who've been academics, researchers, and entrepreneurs, sometimes you get frustrated sort of observing and researching and wanting to actually jump in and be part of the solution. And as I was researching for the book, I started getting so frustrated with the way our economy was going, but so optimistic about where we could take it if people had the leadership and commitment to actually execute, leveraging things like blockchain. And in the smart city space, I noticed there was a lot of opportunity, especially in mobility. And so I was inspired to take the plunge and just, leave behind the security of the academic lifestyle.
Look, I think as you said, this Pundi X was founded in response to an obvious problem, and that was the issue of unbanked individuals in Indonesia. It's not a market that a lot of people target for business startups, a lot of foreign interest target for business startups, perhaps for obvious reasons. But it was probably the meeting between our company president, Kiki, who's been one of the earliest innovators in fintech in Indonesia. He's been in that space for 20 years, just after the financial crisis in Asia in 1998, with some of our other founders who had experience of cashless payments in places like China, in places like Sweden. And I guess that formed the idea to perhaps move into Jakarta and start operating there.
Right. So how did the blockchain component start?
So blockchain, as I said, I think earlier, blockchain kind of found us. I mean, the obvious solution and the easiest low-tech way to go about things in 2016 when we launched was just a QR code payment app. And we were surprised by the uptake of that. I mean, we had 100,000 registered users in Jakarta within a short time, and we had the highest active rate for any mobile payment app in Jakarta, certainly, probably Indonesia, I'd say. And so that surprised us. I mean, that reflected a lot of demand. And so we started looking at, potential expansion. And around the same time, a lot of the guys from our research team in Shenzhen started sort of getting interested in blockchain. And it was just a very, very natural application. I mean, it's very, very much the bread and butter, isn't it, of blockchain, managing financial transfers and payments. And so we twined the two.
Right, so it was the research team that incubated the idea and then subsequently rolled it out to the entire company.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we had a fast-growing app on our hands, and we surprised by the extent of demand out there for cashless payments, and we thought, well, how do we take this further? And
exciting. So I'm sure all of us saw the opportunity and saw like our role, the role that we could play in that situation, right? But I actually have a lot of respect for entrepreneurs. It's not easy to build something from the ground, not easy to get users to tweak your product and so on. And I think it's doubly difficult to do so in the blockchain industry for an emerging technology where there's very little standards, regulation, there are different players trying to do very different things. Can you share with us about some of the challenges that you faced, maybe in general as an entrepreneur, and specifically for the industry?
I can start. So I think that was actually made it much more interesting, the fact that it's really new and there's no standards, there's completely nothing. I still remember the very first clients that we worked with. I mean, it was like not yet, it was at a point where it was not clear what does it mean to do a security audit for a company. What should you include there? It was completely, blank, like nobody knew. And then I think it was very rewarding over time because we started, you can actually help introduce the standards. You can say, you actually have to talk about first, like what's the scope, what's actually the intended behavior. Then, so you get to outline the key points that people should follow. And nowadays, I always follow what others do. And they do followed a lot of the things that we started back in 2017. So I think that's very rewarding. And the other thing was that because it's very new and people are very confused and don't know what to do, this also fosters a lot of collaboration. So maybe I think sometimes people are surprised, but actually with a lot of our competitors, including in the US, we constantly chat on Telegram, have joint meetings to discuss like what makes sense, what doesn't make sense. So in a way, people are more open, I think, because it's okay to collaborate because, this way we get to, all benefit and be stronger. So I think, I don't think this would have happened if you would jump onto a really established market where you really have to offset the existing people there.
Right, it's very interesting because it's not yet mature. There's so much room for us to create the standards and to collaborate, to grow the entire industry. So would you say there's a clearer standard now or industry agreed upon standard?
No. This will take a while. I think these things really take time. It's definitely way better than if you look at 1 year ago. The situation is much, much different now. It keeps improving, but it's really not something you fix over a few months. I really think it would take several years more until it matures properly.
Right. And we're part of the solution. Anyone else want to share about the challenges?
Actually, Zcoin had so many challenges from the very beginning. I mean, back then, like you say in 2016 or 2015, you just need a single developer. You took Bitcoin code, you changed one bit of it, and then you call it an altcoin, right? And we did have a working Zerocoin implementation, but it was basically just one developer, and we had one other co-founder at that time. And there was no structure. There were no institutions to turn to funding. So the first guys who were giving us funding were guys like Roger Ver. So they gave us some money. And our founder's Parman, he's like a developer, really brilliant guy, but have no business experience. Left it to his co-founder, and no legal agreements or anything like that. And that was before I came in, obviously. But what happened was, I think 1 month from launch, our co-founder ran away with all our money, like a couple of hundred Bitcoin. And we had to start from scratch, and I was being paid $200 a month just for sugars, and I had to find new investors, how to restructure the whole thing, find developers, and just as we were getting our feedback, trying to find people to fund our project, because we only had one developer and no code oversight whatsoever. We got hit by another hack that created coins out of thin air. It was horrible. It was I thought we were dead, and it took a really, really long time to build trust again. We were listed in Bittrex and then Binance, then Huobi, but it took a really long time to find people, who weren't just in it for the money. They just really wanted to contribute to our project and build. And most of these guys who joined us in the early days, they just saw what someone was talking about us on YouTube, and they're like, hey, can I help out? And now it's very different. Now it's like, how much you're going to pay me, how much equity, what's my strategic allocation. It's a very different world, and we kind of went through that stage of amateurs and now, becoming a very different type of entity. And it was a lot of growing pains. So now we have like cryptographers on board and all sorts of other stuff. But it was a very, very painful process. And we're still, of course, still learning. Yeah.
Can we unpack that a little bit? So when your founders ran away and when the hacks happened, how did you continue to inspire confidence in your project? And how did you convince yourself to stay even?
That's a really good question. I mean, like, first of all, I think, there aren't that many, genuine privacy protocols out there. Maybe like, I can count it on one hand, right? And there was some of the early adopters of Zcoin, really liked what we were doing. And I think the most important thing is that when we were hacked, when we were all these things, we were completely transparent. Like, we got hacked. This is what happened. This is all the crap that we've been through. We're not going anywhere. We're still here to development. Of course, you will have a huge outflow of people. Many people that were initially supportive of Zcoin, like even guys like Andreas Birken, when they saw all this crap, they're just like, oh, this is a, S-coin, a shitcoin. And you just have to keep building, and it just takes like, maybe years to rebuild that trust. Like, oh, hey, they're developing something, and look, they're contributing to academic research, and slowly their code is getting better and better. It's not an instant process, but once you break that trust, you just have to really just put everything on the table. And that's, I guess, why we've continuously provided that. Everything, every development milestone, every hiccup that we face, we just tell them upfront what it is. And I do think that people who are part of our community really appreciate that. So, yeah.
Right. So it's really embodying that openness and the transparency of a decentralized
That's
community
right,
as
yeah.
well. Okay, and just putting your head down and continue building through it all.
Yep.
Thank you.
Mainly I see like three areas of challenge. First of all, like NFTs is very, very new. Blockchain is new. NFTs even newer. It's like just about a year old now. So the beginning was very problematic trying to explain what they are and what they do to people. And then first thing there's that's CryptoKitties, like, that's a fad. So it at the beginning was complicated to explain to people that actually it's a technology that can, open new economic incentive for a huge industry like gaming. And then people started getting it now. Google and Samsung just invested in last round for CryptoKitties. There's, large corporation are understanding that Tron just launched yesterday or 2 days ago a $100 million fund for gaming for their chain. The other one is regulations. So, I mean, one of the reason of this market condition as well is the uncertainty. The FCC is cracking down of not so clean projects, and I think it's a good thing. It's good to have a cleanup. But that as well brings uncertainty because you have many different countries with different regulation. Blockchain is global; it's borderless. But then
Have
you
you
need
been
to comply.
affected by the regulation?
Local regulation, yeah.
Have you been? Has CryptoCars been impacted?
No, we had our lawyers looking into an NFTs, and we've been in Hong Kong. We've been told that actually that in utility it's a game item. So we've been told that we're clear.
Right,
But
you skirted
still,
around it, yes.
Yeah, exactly. We did our homework, but you never know. Regulations are very, very fluid and different in every country. And the third big problem as well is user adoption and scalability. I mean, at the moment, using any app is very clunky. UX, UI is non-existent. And as I mentioned before, during my presentation before, in order to have adoption, people need to use the technology without even knowing that they're using that technology. Needs to be seamless, and at the moment that's not happening yet. Still very early stage. I'm pretty confident that this is gonna happen. Industry is very new, but at the moment that's speed bump.
Right, so how are you driving adoption then? How are you pushing for it?
You need to drive adoption by having people actually using what you built. So you need to start, I mean, we do have an MVP because we want people starting using it, giving us feedback. As well, hopefully UX, UI will, help more mainstream users to do gaming using blockchain. At the moment, it's a no-go if somebody needs to go through all the hoops of registering on exchanges. It's just a no-go.
Yeah. So to buy a CryptoCar skin, you actually don't need to do all of that?
We're planning to do our sales during WAX, which is our partners, as a marketplace that has all the pipeline for use credit cards and fiat. So that should, and also they have a very large user base of gamers that are
Right.
not necessarily crypto people. So that should help reaching out to a wider audience. Yeah.
Right, so partnerships to improve the user experience and also tap into the user base such that they can use credit cards and their existing methods to just buy a non-fungible token, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a barrier to entry is very high. I mean, it's complex for somebody that it's not used to this.
Yes.
Yeah.
Got it.
As the exporter and manufacturer of a hardware-based point-of-sales device pursuing an international expansion strategy, we've kind of had a front-row seat to the issue of regulation and how regulations are evolving in different countries, and often that seat's pulled out from under us as we plan to enter into a market, something changes. In Indonesia, for example, where we were founded, it's illegal now to use cryptocurrency as a commodity. The same goes for Hong Kong, so you can buy and sell crypto, but you can't use it to buy a loaf of bread, for example. And so that's required us to sort of change the way we operate and change our business plan on the fly in response to regulations. And there's obviously a great wave at the moment. I mean, everyone's focused on the SEC in America and their recent actions, but there's a lot of stuff underway in countries all around the world. You know, places like Thailand, their equivalent of the SEC is looking over things right now, and that presents all kinds of challenges. There's also the softer kinds of regulations, like every market has its own mores in terms of customs, certification, things like that, and you certainly come in for a bit of extra attention if you're associated with cryptocurrency in any way. I think a lot of people who are involved in this endeavour will know that getting a bank account even is, a tremendous challenge. But then again, we've also been surprised, it must be said. I mean, the UAE, which is one of the more heavily regulated markets for this kind of thing, has actually emerged as one of our main markets. The government there is, even though it frowns upon crypto comparatively, is embarking on the creation of Mcash, which is a stable pegged version of the UAE dirham, and we're the hardware provider for them. And if you would have told me that we'd be at a conference in Dubai and overwhelmed with interest from people in countries like the UAE, Saudi Arabia, I would have thought you were dreaming. But it's not always negative.
Very interesting. So you faced the regulatory challenges and you nimbly moved your way around to different countries then. So you pivoted your direction to move to UAE, to Singapore perhaps. So what's happened to Hong Kong and Indonesia now? Are you no longer in those countries?
Well, yeah. I mean, pivot is a very grand term, isn't it? It's more like the path changes in front of us and perhaps you just roll along it. But look, it necessitates a change in strategy. For example, in Indonesia, we are focusing on the other uses of our point of sales device. So for buying and selling cryptocurrency for exchange, that's okay. That's perfectly fine under Indonesian law. But the direct use is not allowed. There's not much you can do about that. I mean, we've got a very good lawyer, David Ben Kay, who's the ex-general counsel for Microsoft China and for the Ethereum Foundation. And, he has an immense amount of regulation to keep up with. And there's not really two ways about it. If you want to be credible and taken seriously, you have to comply with the letter of the law. So, we don't skirt that. But it has, it has changed the terrain. And I suppose you tend to move more towards markets that are friendlier. I mean, the Monetary Authority of Singapore has made some very encouraging statements recently about blockchain, for example, and other jurisdictions are doing the same, and that will invariably, I suppose, channel more investment and more resources towards them, and so it goes.
Right, so as long as you're nimble enough to maneuver to different markets or different countries that you need. I can imagine it must have been quite a blow because, like you mentioned, Indonesia was your largest market, right? And having to exit the Pundi market there.
Yeah, look, I mean, we haven't exited per se. I mean, it's just that sort of our reason for being isn't so easily performed in Indonesia. But yeah, I mean, that's a big blow, and it's unusual to be restricted in your home country, where you're sort of quite well known. but perhaps drops down the priority ladder a bit. I mean, that's a blow. But, you know, that policy is under review by the Indonesian Central Bank, and they, like a lot of other central banks, are taking a pretty cautious approach to these things. But, you know, they'll evolve. Nothing's written in stone. And I think the success of these smaller, more progressive markets will probably dictate policy in the larger. So, I mean, if you can move towards places where things are happening and be shown to be a success, then your reward will perhaps come later.
Right. So, but the converse is also true, right? Even in countries that you are now operating in, the next day or the next month, suddenly they could shut you down. So, how do you prepare for that kind of possibility?
Yeah, look, that's very true. And I mean, I guess you just exercised your good judgment. I mean, a good example here is India. I think a lot of people have probably been watching that market, I mean, for obvious reasons, and the status of cryptocurrency there. There was a report earlier this year by the Law Reform Commission that recommended legalising cryptocurrencies as mediums for payment, and everyone got very excited. So, well, this is the highest judicial policy making body in the land. Well, great things are going to happen. And then a month later, there was a high court case, and everything went out the window. So I guess it means you have to be judicious and assess the terrain as to how much things are going to shift under your feet.
Right. So always keep an ear to the ground and be nimble enough to move. Boyd?
Yeah, so I guess in response to the question about challenges, I'll be real quick because I think we've heard most of what I wanted to say anyway. One is, of course, raising money in a crypto winter. So if you didn't do your ICO in the boom days and you're raising money now, and I see there's a lot of entrepreneurs in the audience shaking their head like, yeah, it's not so fun right now like it was several months ago. And the other thing I would say, and I've heard a bit of this already, is the issue around narrative. So, like, what's the role of blockchain in your narrative when you're explaining your solution to stakeholders? And I think a challenge we had early on was we were flawed in our narrative. We were leading with blockchain. We're a blockchain company that's doing this to the mobility marketplace. And so our market entry strategy is through public transit authorities. Imagine that conversation we were having with transit authorities, including with LTA here in Singapore, but many around the world. We started in our home city of Barcelona, and it was like, we've heard of blockchain, but what is it? And then we had 3 meetings with them to explain what blockchain was and how it might impact mobility. And we never got around to really explaining what we were building and how it could add value to society and to the ecosystem. And so it's been a journey for us to understand the right narrative to explain the value proposition that we offer. And now, actually, I just had a meeting with an investor in Singapore 2 days ago, and it was so funny because we finished this great discussion, and when we got done, he said, wow, I don't think you said blockchain once in the whole conversation. I didn't even realize it, but I didn't, because I'm now focusing on what the value proposition is. So it's been an evolution in how to explain the story. And actually this week we just got our first major sort of contract with Ford Motor Company in the city of Pittsburgh, and it's been by not emphasizing blockchain but emphasizing the value proposition. Oh, by the way, blockchain helps us achieve it.
Right. Increasingly, we hear that as well from various projects on making the blockchain invisible or making it like part of the solution, which you don't have to explain. It's the value proposition to the users, to the businesses that we should focus on. Right. Sorry, Ruben, you wanted to add something, or?
Yeah, I mean, just more about like the regulatory changes. I mean, privacy coins are probably the ones probably hit the worst, right? Everyone's like, privacy coins, oh, you're about money laundering or drugs and stuff like that. And I mean, we've seen regulators, still coming to grips with it, like for example, Japan, banning privacy coins because of the CoinCheck hack, which had nothing to do with privacy coins, just like a gut reaction. And privacy coins tend to be a convenient scapegoat. And that's why, although we are a privacy coin, first of all, we want to tell regulators, look, you can either ban us and lose all control of it, or you can regulate us and control at least the fiat conversions. But on the other hand, like for example, with our work where we use privacy technology to enable, wide-scale blockchain e-voting in Thailand, where we did the Democrat Party elections to select their leader, and 127,000 people, voted on Zcoin's blockchain, and we're telling people, hey, privacy is not just about money laundering and stuff. It's kind of shifting the narrative, as you were saying, that not just focusing on blockchain, about what's the value proposition, why is privacy important besides hiding illicit activity. And
I think he deserves an applause for 127,000 users of his solution.
Yes, definitely. I was really excited to hear about the news as well. So very glad that we've come to that point. I think in the limited time we have left, we're slightly over time now. I want to wrap up on a more optimistic note, right? Such as the one that Ruben mentioned about e-voting of 127,000 people on blockchain using Zcoin. Can you share with us about some of the success stories, some of the points of success that we can share that brings us more optimistic view of the future?
I'll do this one because this happens to be an exciting week for IOMOB, and so I'm very optimistic this week. This was a City of Tomorrow challenge in Pittsburgh, funded by Ford. They had 129 applicants. We are one of the only blockchain solutions. The challenge was not specific to our solution, but to mobility generally. Improve the quality of life for local residents in Pittsburgh with an innovative mobility solution was basically the challenge. And we won, and what's cool about that to me is that the value proposition that blockchain enables, when told the right way, can be so compelling to a city government and to Ford that they would choose it over more traditional solutions. So I think that's an exciting development that a lot of us on the stage and some of the other ones I heard are already having that kind of experience with the real world. We also this week had another major West Coast city in the US verbally agreed to a pilot with us, and they're a very high profile city. And I left a few days ago Bangkok, and we got a verbal agreement there. So the narrative is improving on our end, and I think that at least in our sector, what cities are starting to understand is they have, and I'm going to be talking in a few minutes, so I don't want to explain too much of that now, but cities are starting to realize that there's a few massive waves hitting them. So they have massive population influx, right? And they have massive demand for mobility. Mobility is something everyone in the world believes should be a basic human right, because if you don't have good access to mobility, you don't have good access to improving your life, to jobs, to services you need. So cities are seeing the massive global VC-backed mobility companies coming in and doing what they choose to do. And they're seeing this rapid fragmentation of the market with all these scooters and bike shares coming up everywhere. And so it's a big chaotic mess. And what we're finding is that cities they're not talking blockchain, but they're saying, in fact, there's the director for the Los Angeles Department of Transportation, just like 2 weeks ago, was quoted in a newspaper saying, what we need is a Linux for urban mobility. We need an open source solution where every mobility company can plug and play and be interoperable around the world, and citizens can be tapped into one and travel around the world and have access to all the mobility services. Instead of the monopolization of mobility from private sector, which could have negative implications on inclusive access to mobility and on the usage and optimization of public transit, what we need to be doing is empowering and enabling all mobility providers, whether they're an independent taxi or a larger company, and connect them to public transit. And so cities are starting to ask for that solution without realizing they're actually asking for blockchain or for IOMOB. But now it's our job to help them understand, oh, what you want is IOMOB. And we're getting there.
Very exciting.
I cannot continue with the examples, I think, from cities. So actually, few months ago, I think now, so in Zug, the crypto valley in Switzerland, there was released a new platform for e-voting, which was developed on not a public but permission blockchain. But I think it's also an example where people. Well, I think the interesting thing there was that we also help them to review, if it's secure, if it provides all the proper voting guarantees. So there are strict things you have to conform to if you want to do voting. And there was actually, the use of the blockchain was, there was a particular element where you basically want to show completeness, that my vote would be there. And It was actually possible. It is possible also to do without the blockchain. So we asked, why did you go in this direction? And the key people, they just said, well, actually, the blockchain they were using, Hyperledger Fabric in their case, it solves exactly this particular problem. So it was not kind of starting with the blockchain, but they said, hey, we actually need these properties here for this to ensure these security properties over the voting. And Hyperledger Fabric could provide us this, so we just took it and used it, and here's how we build the solution. So I think it's a good example of basically blockchain becoming a small part of a bigger solution that is where it's not so visible and upfront.
Fantastic.
I want to go a bit more down market here. I mean, we've had democracy, we've had urban design, we've had everything here. But I want to talk about the Electronic Music Festival in Taiwan, Ultra Taiwan, that was run on our point of sales device in early September. 40,000 people went. It was absolutely pouring rain, and 40 different stalls from Johnny Walker to Red Bull ran all their transactions on our point of sales device. And the reason I like that is not just because electronic dance music is cool, but because it showed that this stuff can actually work in a real life environment, and quite a stressful one at that. So that's always encouraging.
Amazing. Congratulations.
I like a lot of projects for supply chain and provenance, like VeChain we had before. There's other ones like Wabe, Brothers. I think it's a very good application of blockchain that can be used actually to make sure that people don't get sick. I remember like a few years ago there was a problem with baby powder milk in China. A few babies, I think they died. There was an issue in Hong Kong when I was still living there with the gutter oil from Taiwan that was used to make bread. So I think like it's a very very powerful application for food, for example.
Yes, certainly. And in fact, we have the demo of VeChain as well on their sneakers, showing exactly where the shoe was produced, when it was produced. So very great to hear about all these projects and all this progress as well. Thank you so much for ending on this optimistic note. Please give our panel a big hand. Thank you very much.